Hi, everybody. So I think it's about time to start. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar 2023. To introduce myself, my name is Lara Angelil, and I am a sales and support representative at Reprtoir. Before I get started, I just want to let you guys know that throughout the webinar, I'm not going to be answering any questions, but please, on the bottom right of your Google Meet window, if you click on activities, there is a Q&A and you'll be able to ask us some questions there. And then later on at the end of the webinar, I will come back to that and I will answer your questions to the best of my abilities. All right, so to get started, I'm just going to give you a quick summary of Reprtoir and what Reprtoir is, especially for the people that are new here. So Reprtoir is an all-in-one music business management tool that specializes in catalog management and royalty accounting for record labels and publishers. We are a multi-user platform that is intuitively user-friendly and innovatively designed. We're a SaaS company, so that's software as a service, and we are accessible to all company sizes. Reprtoir was created to optimize and facilitate your daily music business workflow, meaning it's meant to work alongside of you on a daily basis. All right, so some of the problems that we aim to solve with Reprtoir are, for example, disorganized metadata handling, having your metadata across multiple spreadsheets, multiple softwares, no centralized place for your asset storage, so that being your metadata, but also your audio files, difficulty processing your royalty statements and slowing down your accounting process, reduced metadata access, struggling with accessing and exporting your metadata via other platforms, delay in calculating payments for your rights holders, sharing music effectively from music business management, lack of data transparency between your company and your rights holders, and lastly, inefficient catalog management workflow. Now, before I get started, I'm also just going to give you some bite-sized examples of all of the things that you can do with Reprtoir, just to give you an overview of all of our tools. So first and foremost, of course, organize your metadata all in one place and manage to export your metadata and your audio files at any time, at any volume. Sharing playlists with insights and analytics. You can manage your contacts and your rights holder information in our client relations manager, and you can also prepare releases for the Orchard and Believe, if those are two distributors that you work with. You can manage and process your royalty statements and also manage your expenses, fees, and advances. Calculate your payments and issue your rights holder statements. And you can access all of that sales data with our analytics. And you will also soon have access to our AI audio analysis tools, which actually is a new feature that we have not released yet. So you will be the first audience to see a demo of this today. All right, so with further ado, I'm going to jump into our demonstration. I'm going to be going over catalog management. I'm also going to take you through the interface. I will be explaining all of the features and tools that we have in Reprtoir, but I may not demo all of it to the fullest extent. And I will also take you through a basic royalty accounting flow. Okay, so let's jump right in. So here we are in the Reprtoir Workspace. And the first page is just a get started section. It's a resource page to help you learn our software. On the left-hand side, you have access to all of our tools. So first you have your catalog management, your client relations manager, music sharing, your release builder, and lastly, your royalty accounting. And at the bottom here, you also have your notifications. And when clicking on your icon, you can access your settings. So before I'm going to head into our catalog management, I'm quickly going to hop into our settings. And I'm just going to talk about our multi-user function. So I'm going to click on Teams. And here you'll be able to see all of the people that you are collaborating on this one account. So as I've mentioned before, Reprtoir is a multi-user platform, which means that you're able to have multiple people collaborating and working on one account. Get started with catalog management. So I'm going to hop into here. Catalog management is where all of your asset metadata is going to be stored, including your audio files. So that would be your albums, tracks, videos, and also your works. It's also the place where all your contributors' information is housed. That's all the people that you work with. Your properties, which means your list of catalogs and also your tag library. You also have access to Reprtoir Inbox here, which I'm going to come back to a little bit later, and also your import tools, which I'm going to go over in detail now. So in Reprtoir, we have 4 primary ways of importing your information in bulk into Reprtoir. So the first one is Reprtoir Spreadsheets. Reprtoir Spreadsheets is essentially a Google spreadsheet template that you fill in with your asset metadata information and then import back into our system. And I'm not going to go through the imports demo, but I will show you what it looks like. So when clicking on new spreadsheet, I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this demo spreadsheet. And I'm going to choose one of our templates, which of course would relate to whatever asset you're going to be importing. So in my case, let's say that's tracks. And I will hit save. And this is going to open up a new tab. Now, before I can upload anything here, I'm going to need to fill out my spreadsheet template. So I'm going to click on that here, and that's going to open up a new landing page. So the first thing is you will have your instructions. And next to that tab, you will have an example of the actual spreadsheet. So as you can see, it's the same as a Google spreadsheet. Essentially, there is mandatory columns that look like so. And what you would do going forward from here is you would retrieve your information. Let's say that's on another spreadsheet, and you would bulk copy and paste this into the correct place. Once all the mandatory fields are filled out, you export this as a CSV. Then you would head back into your upload portal right here, and you would upload that spreadsheet right here. Now, as you can see, there is a validation process that this goes through. So that means if, for example, there's an error in your spreadsheet or something doesn't correlate to your Reprtoir account, our system would flag that and ask you to correct it. We want to make sure the information is going to be imported in our system correctly, especially if you're going to be using Reprtoir for royalty accounting. Next, we have our CWR importer, which is actually something that we've newly made available. If you are, for example, a publisher that works in this file format, this is a very efficient way of getting your works information and your chain of rights into your Reprtoir account. Next, we have our Spotify importer, which is by far the most efficient way of getting your information into your account. So if your albums and releases are already on Spotify, you can simply pull that information from Spotify into your Reprtoir account. So for example, let's say I want to get a Jennifer Lopez album into my account. I simply type the name and hit enter, and it will display all of the releases in relationship to this artist that exist on Spotify here in my workspace. I simply choose the album that I want to import. I select, right click, and hit import. And this is going to import all that information into my albums list right here. So I'm going to head in there. I'm going to give this a quick refresh. This can take a moment while it's retrieving all of that information. Another little quick refresh, and there we go. The album has been imported. So when I click on that, you'll see all of the tracks, all of the information has successfully been imported. Now, heading back into our Spotify importer, we've recently added another feature, which is you can actually import from a list of UPCs. Now, instead of having to manually type in every artist's name, finding the album, importing it, if you have a list of UPCs and correlate to UPCs in Spotify, you can simply list them here and import them in bulk. And lastly, YouTube importer, which is essentially the same thing as Spotify importer. No need for me to demo that. It's a way of getting your video information into your Reprtoir account in the same fashion as Spotify importer. All right, next I'm going to head into my tracks list here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the interface. So Reprtoir is organized into what we call dynamic lists, and they look the same throughout the entire platform and also function the same way. You can, for example, simply sort them by clicking on the headers like so. You can also manage the columns by clicking on the column icon here and hit Manage Columns. Here you can choose exactly what information you want to see and also in what order. So for example, let's say I want to see the Spotify popularity. I will pull this next to my ISRC code and hit Apply. I can also save this as a template, which means this will pop up right here and you can revisit that later, or just simply hit Apply and that will pop up right there. Now, as I've mentioned before on the PDF, you can also export all of your metadata and your audio files easily in Reprtoir. So for example, I can easily bulk select, right click, and go to export. Here I can export my metadata and my audio files. And when clicking on metadata, you will have the same pop-up window that you've just seen with Columns Manager, which allows you to, again, choose any of the information that you want to see in whichever order that you want. You can even choose your file formats, save as a template, or simply export. That said, I quickly want to note that for publishers out there, we also are able to export in CWR format. Now, lastly, for the interface, when at the moment, as you can see, I'm viewing things in tab format. So for example, if I'm going to open up a new window, I can view information like so, but you can also view information in panel view by clicking down here, which will allow you to drag and drop and compare information. Okay, I'm going to click on out of here. Now I'm going to head into one of my tracks. I'm going to click on one of my pre-made filters here. And I'm going to choose my song Cowboys from the Fugees as my demo track, and I will click on that. Oh, coming out of the panel view, here we go. And this is going to open up what we call a detailed metadata panel that shows you a series of tabs. Now, the tabs will vary depending on the asset, but the tabs will always provide you either with information or allow you to take an action. So first, you have your basic information. You also can view your lyrics if you've added them, which you can do by clicking edit here. You will also be able to see if you've linked any contracts to this track, which will make sense a little bit later when we talk about royalty accounting. For the time being, I'm just going to skip over our AI audio analysis and our collector. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Next, you have your audio file tab, which allows you to download your audio files again, or if you haven't actually imported an audio file here, you can upload your audio file. We also have an audio clusters tab, which is essentially a groupings of identical tracks, which means if, for example, I have used this track in a repertoire playlist, it would display twice here because I've used the identical track twice in my catalog. Lastly, you can also associate your resources, very useful, especially for publishers. You're able to link your works to your tracks and your tracks to your works, and also associate a video to this track. Okay, so that finally brings me to talking about some of our data enrichment. So we have what we call metadata collector, which is one of our data enrichment features, which essentially allows us to pull expert information from Spotify directly into your account. So you have access to interesting information like your Spotify popularity. You also have a direct URL to the track in Spotify. This information is updated regularly on a 24-hour basis to make sure that this information stays up to date. We also have access to the audio analysis, so it gives you information like the key, tempo, the danceability ratio, how likely are people, to dance to the song, for example. And finally, that brings me to our newest feature, which are our audio analysis tools, our AI audio analysis tools in partnership with Cyanide. Like I said before, this is actually a feature that we have not released yet, which means that you are the first people to see a demonstration of that. And the two tools that we will have available are the AI audio similarity search and our auto tagging. So I'm going to head back over into my tracks list, and I'm going to demo how to search by similarity. So first, I'm going to exit out of my filters here. I'm going to click on search by similarity, and I'm going to choose a reference track here. Now, I can either choose a reference track from my catalog. I can also choose a reference track from Spotify, or I can upload an audio file to use as a reference track. In my case, I'm going to go back to my trusted song by the Fugees and click on that. Now, as you can see, the system is already automatically showing me all the tracks that it considers similar to this particular segment. Now, I can also choose a different segment of this track. So I can say, okay, I want you to use this particular audio segment as a similarity. And there you go. That's updated already. And this is all the tracks that it considers similar in relationship to this particular segment. Now, if I head back into my track, the tab similar tracks is essentially just showing you all of the tracks that we've just did the search with, that we've just found. Now, when clicking on AI audio analysis, you will have access to all of your auto-generated tags. So first, you have the general information about this track that was pulled. Next, after that, you can see all of your auto tags and also the ratio of these tags. And below that, which is quite impressive, is you have access to your audio charts, which essentially allow you to track the actual dominance and proportion of particular descriptors throughout the entire track. And as you can see, it's really extensive. The descriptors that are highlighted are the ones that it has found. And all the way at the bottom, you even have access to some augmented keywords. Now that brings me to our tags, because of course you can filter with all of these auto-generated tags. So I'm going to head into our tag library. I'm going to click on tag categories. Repertoire is organized into tags in Repertoire are organized into tag categories, which are made up of a series of tags. And these tags are also part of a particular type. So again, if, for example, if these have been auto-generated, they will say auto-generated. The internal tags mean that they're tags that you have either manually imported or have created inside Repertoire. And these tag categories are made up of a series of tags. And by clicking on this, you will see the detailed tags. And again, tag category and also the type. And that brings me to our filter system. Of course, in Reprtoir, you can filter with all of these tags, but also with an extensive amount of metadata points. So if I head back into my tracks list, I'm going to exit out of my similarity search here. If you are in a list view in Reprtoir, on the left-hand side, you will always have access to a filter system. You can simply click Add Filter, and as you can see, you can virtually filter with almost every data point in Reprtoir. So in my case, let's say I want to filter this list by Spotify popularity because I have access to metadata collectors. So I click on this, and let's say I want to go a step further and say I want to see this between the values of 10 and 20, and that is updating live, as you can see. Now I can save this as a search, which will pop up here, or I can simply leave this as is. I can go even a step further and say, okay, I'm going to go into my columns manager, and I'm going to find my Spotify popularity because I want to see the actual value. I want this displayed next to my main artist title. And there we go. Now I can see that like so. Okay, so that was basically a sort of comprehensive overview of catalog management and also the interface. I'm now going to take you through some of the other features that we have, and then I'm going to go through a royalty accounting workflow. So next, on the left-hand side, you have your client relations manager, which is essentially the address book that houses all the legal names of your rights holders. And we recommend that you add email addresses to all of these names because that will allow you to create a rights holder portal later. You can either manually add a contact or you can import this from a spreadsheet in bulk. Next, we have music sharing, which houses your playlist creation tool and also Reprtoir Outbox, which I'm going to come back to in a minute. I'm not going to demo how to create a playlist because that's relatively self-explanatory, but I did pre-create one, and I will show you what that looks like. So when clicking on the playlist, of course, first you will see the tracks that you've added. You have the basic information of the playlist. And when clicking on shares, you will be able to see which contact you have shared this playlist with. And you can share your playlist by clicking on share here. Now the recipient will receive a URL that when clicking on will open into a private landing page like so, where they can listen to the playlist. You can also give permission to these recipients. So for example, you can restrict them from downloading and ask them only to stream, etc. But most importantly, when heading back into your workspace, you can click on analytics, and here you'll be able to track the behavior of those listeners. So how many times they've streamed, if they've downloaded, and also you can see this on a timeline basis, and also on a track-by-track basis. So it's really quite extensive. When clicking on file upload, you can also personalize this playlist by adding artwork to it. Now, that said, actually, we are in the process of revamping Reprtoir Playlist. So in the next coming months, we are going to be releasing a new version of playlist creation, which is going to have some additional features and look slightly different. So if you are new here and you're going to be coming on board with us, this might look a little bit different very soon, but we're looking forward to share that all with you when that's ready to be released. Now, next is Reprtoir Outbox and Inbox. So Reprtoir Outbox and Inbox is essentially the possibility to share asset metadata and audio files and tags across multiple Reprtoir accounts. So not only do you have a multi-user function where you can have multiple people collaborating on one account, you also are able to share across multiple accounts. So for example, if in your company you have 2 Reprtoir accounts, you can easily share assets, or maybe it's a company that you work with that also has a Reprtoir account, you'll be easily able to share asset information. And earlier when I was talking about the tags, the auto-generated tags and internal tags, you also have a type that is called the external tags, which are essentially tags that have been sent to you by another Reprtoir account. Okay, next I'm going to head into my release builder. I'm going to click on that, exit out of here. So our release builder is one of the products that we are going to be building out in the coming years. At the moment, as I said before at the beginning of the webinar, at the moment, this is only limited and compatible with Believe and the Orchard. Essentially what it is you create a release package that you download that you're able to upload to the bulk upload tool of Believe in the Orchard, and it will be 100% compatible with those bulk upload tools. So again, like I've said, at the moment, this is relatively limited, but for the people that do work with distributors like Believe in the Orchard, this essentially allows you to partially automate your delivery process. But I am going to talk a little bit more about what we have planned for this a bit later in the webinar when I'm going to go over our roadmap. For now, it's finally time for us to jump into royalty accounting. So I'm just going to flip back over to the PDF, and I'm going to show you the basic concept of how royalty accounting in Reprtoir is structured. So first of all, of course, to use Reprtoir for royalty accounting, you need to have your asset information in your account. Second, you need to have your rights holder information in your client relations manager. And next, you need to create Reprtoir contracts that mimic your real life contracts, which will house your split information. Once that's done, you will take these contracts and link them to your assets. And from there, you will be able to create an income, ingest your royalty statement into a statement mapper, calculate your royalties, and issue your statements and document your payments. So I'm going to show you what that looks like in real time. So I'm going to head into my royalties accounting. Now, in my case, obviously, my assets are already imported in my catalog manager. My rights holder information is already in my client relations manager. So I'm going to head to the next step, which is to create my contracts. Now, in Reprtoir, when clicking on new contract, you have a series of contract templates and also two different types of contracts. Now, the contract templates are as follows. We have a label contract, which relates to your recording assets. You have a publishing contract, which will relate to your work assets, and other contract, which will relate to anything that is not a music asset. And you can also bulk import your contract information through our spreadsheet system. Now, you also have two different types of contracts. You have a money in and a money out contract. The money in contract defines the relationship between you and the company that is paying you. So for example, your distributor or your aggregator, for example, The Orchard. So it's money that is being paid to your company. A money out contract defines the relationship between you and your rights holder. So you paying royalties out to your rights holder. Money in contracts are mandatory in Reprtoir to create per income that you're going to make in relationship to your statement provider. So for example, you need to create a money in contract for every single statement provider. Money in contracts do not affect royalty accounting in any way. They are just for documentation purposes, but they are mandatory. Money out contracts are the contracts that you're going to be creating that you will link to your assets. So in my case, I've already pre-created a money in contract in relationship to my statement provider, which I will ingest later. And I need to now create my money out contract. I am going to be dealing with tracks, so recording assets, so I will be using a label contract money out. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this demo contract out. My organization has already automatically been defined, but if I have multiple organizations on my Reprtoir account, which you can have multiple organizations. For example, if you have a publishing arm and a label arm, then you can define that here. In my case, I will leave this as is. If you are collecting 100% of royalties of a certain asset, you can also tick this box here. Next, I will define my payee, which in my case is a guy named Philip Jogwell, which we will be using as our rights holder for this demo. I can also add contributors, which sometimes people tend to get a bit confused over. Is the payee is obviously the legal name of your rights holder, and contributors could, for example, be the artist name of your rights holder if you wanted to note that in the contract. In my case, I will leave this blank. Now you can define also, of course, territory, exclusivity, start and end date, resignation notice, auto renewal, and all these different details. I'm going to leave this blank for the sake of time. Now I'm just going to quickly pause here for balance closing frequency. This is going to make sense a little bit later down the line, but in Reprtoir, you can actually automate your contract balance closing frequency, which means I'm going to be doing this manually today, but you can automate this by ticking here and choosing when you want that contract balance to close out. This is going to make a little bit more sense later down the line, but just note that. You can also determine a minimum payout. For example, if you want a rights holder to only be paid out when a threshold of €50 has been reached, then you can determine that here. You can also give this a reference and notes. All right, I'm going to hit save, and that is going to open up a new tab. Now, first I have the basic information, and when clicking on terms, you will be able to determine your splits. Now, in my case, I'm going to be extremely generous, and I'm going to be giving Philip a lot of royalties for the sake of demonstration only. Maybe not 500, but 50 is good. You can also create customized splits in Reprtoir. In your settings, you're able to create custom splits, and you can determine if you want them to be shown on your label contract or your publishing contract. In my case, I've just left a demonstration split here to show you what that looks like. You can also add deduction rules to your contract, which are essentially the clauses of your contract. So for example, when clicking on a deduction rule, you can say that you want a territory exclusion rule, for example. So if country is United States, then deduct 5 accounting points from the totality of this contract. You can add more conditions to specify. For example, if sales type is, let's say, license, then deduct 5 accounting points from this contract, etc. So this, again, essentially are the clauses of your contract. You can add as many conditions or as many deduction rules as you like. I will just leave this as is. Good, so my contract is ready to go. Now the next step would be to link my money out contract to my assets. So I'm gonna head back over into my tracks list, actually my albums list. Also, I just wanted to remind everybody that if you do have questions throughout this webinar, please feel free to write them on the bottom right. There is an activities button where you can head into the Q&A and write any of your questions. This will speed up the process for us later to answer your questions the best that we can. So I'm going to find my album that this pertains to. So in my case, it's going to be the album of Philip Jogwell, and I will select that here. I'm going to bulk select the tracks, the assets that I want to link my contract to. I will hit edit. I'm going to head into my royalties tab, and I'm going to find my money out contract, which is right here. And I will hit save, which will link the contract to my assets. And that's just, there we go. And now that's been linked. So now the next step, I am now ready to create income and I'm ready to ingest my statement. So I'm going to head back over into my royalties accounting. I'm going to jump into my income section and I'm going to hit new income. Now in my case, I'm going to be importing from the statement file, but you also are able to create any of these manual incomes here. I'm going to hit import from statement file and I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this demo income. Now I'm going to choose my statement provider, which in my case is The Orchard. Reprtoir is already compatible with 100+ statement providers. If your statement provider is not yet compatible in our system, then we ask you to send us a sample statement, which we will use to study to integrate your statement provider into our system. We're constantly expanding our statement providers. So if your statement provider is not compatible yet, don't worry, we'll be able to integrate that for you. Now, next is where my money in contract comes in. So as I've mentioned, these are mandatory and I've already created a money in contract in relationship to The Orchard. So I will note that here. Now you can give this a payment date. You can determine a currency. In my case, my statement is in euro, so I will leave this as is, but you can determine a different currency if, for example, your statement currency is different than the currency that you've determined on your Reprtoir account. In my case, I will leave this blank. Now, the next would be for me to add the statement amount, the net amount. Now, in my case, I know my statement amount, but however, it is possible that you may not know how much is on your statement. And in my case, for the sake of demonstration, I'm just going to guess because I want to demo for you that our system will be able to pull that information for you. It's also a good way to check that the amount you were given is correct. So in my case, I'm going to give this a good guess and I'm going to say 500 and I will leave the gross amount blank and I will hit save. This is going to open up our upload portal. From here, I'm going to hit upload a statement and I'm going to select my statement and hit enter. Now at the moment, the only thing it's doing, it's just making sure that it can read the file format that I have imported. And that can take a few seconds as it's processing. And there we go, that's already finished. So the first thing you'll see is you will see a preview of your statement. So the lines of your statement. And below that, you will see these lines mapped to our system. Now, because The Orchard is already a compatible statement provider, of course, all this information is correct. Now, if there would be an issue, there would be a little cross that would be shown here, and I'd be able to correct that manually. In my case, everything is correct. So I will hit confirm mapping and I will hit OK. Now, at this stage, what it's doing is it's going to retrieve, for example, the statement amount for me. And we've actually recently done a test where we have processed 19 million lines, and we can say that that was done in 20 minutes. So that means that it's 1 million line in a minute, which makes us one of the fastest statement mappers processings on the market. So, and here we go, that's already finished. Now it's giving me an error code, which is absolutely normal. It's essentially flagged that the amount that I've put in earlier is incorrect. So what I would simply do is I would click on edit income and I'm going to copy and paste the correct amount into the correct field. Now, this is also something great to do if you want to double check that the amount that you were given is correct, for example. Then I'm going to save my changes. And the next it has done, it has shown me that there was a unknown value in my sheet. Now, what I can do going forward is I can either quarantine this, meaning let's say I want to deal with this later. I want to go forward with my processing. I can quarantine this line and handle this problem later, or I can make the correction, which in my case, I will make the correction. Now, essentially what this means is that there was a value in my sheet that Reprtoir did not recognize, and it wants you to change that value to the correct value. In my case, in this example, the country name is incorrect. Swaziland is not the name of this country anymore. It is actually Eswatini, so it's asking me to correct that. I will simply select the right value and hit correct. Now, I'm going to confirm my errors. And now what it's doing, it's asking me if I want to save this as a rule. Essentially, in Reprtoir, you can save these issues as a rule, which means that in the future, this will automatically apply. You can see your rules here. So this way, you don't have to each time manually have to fix this problem if it occurs again. So in my case, I'm going to confirm this, and that will take me to the last step of the processing, which right now it's doing all of my royalty accounting and all of that fun stuff. This is usually a really good time to talk a little bit about the technology that we use at Reprtoir. So at Reprtoir, we use what is called a serverless computing technology, which essentially means that our servers are based on a cloud, which in very simple terms means that we do not need to maintain and configure our own servers. It allows us to redistribute some of that developing power towards other things. And we found that this was the most efficient way to run our system. Now, obviously, as with this processing, this can take a bit of time. This is not a huge file, but it still has relatively a lot of lines. So it can take some time for it to process. But there you go. That's already done. So here it will show me a summary of, for example, restate the total amount and also the lines it has processed and if I've quarantined any lines, which in my case, I haven't. Now, when you ingest a statement with Reprtoir, you will always have two outcomes. You will have operations, which are calculations based on a particular sale. And you will also have contract balances, which are the consolidation of your operations based on one contract. Now, going forward from here, what I would be doing is I would be closing out this contract balance. As I've mentioned before, I will be doing this manually. However, when you set up your contract, you can determine a balance closing frequency, which means you can automate this process. In my case, I'm going to do this manually. And also to note, this is also the place where if you had any outstanding expenses or advances, these will be taken into consideration here. So they will be noted here. In my case, I'm going to right click, I'm going to hit close. I'm going to give this an end period. And for the sake of demonstration, I will choose today and I will hit confirm. And this is going to notify my rights holder balance. Now, Reprtoir is essentially organized into some sort of trickle-down effect, which means operations are consolidated into contract balances and contract balances are consolidated into rights holder balances, which in my case, I've only closed out one contract for the rights holder, Philip Jogwell. But if there was multiple contracts linked to this rights holder, these could be consolidated into your rights holder balance. So in my case, the calculation is shown here. And from here, I can create my statement. I've been notified that a statement is ready to be created. So going forward from here, I would right click and hit create a statement. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this demo statement. I'm going to give this a statement end date. Let's say I'm going to choose a month later and I will hit confirm. And this is going to notify my statement section. So as you can see, the flow is a trickle down flow like so. I'm going to head into my statements and there is a new statement that has been created for me. So I'm going to click on that to show you what this looks like. Now, going forward from here, you can either download this and manually send this, or you can head back into your statements list, you can right click and you can hit send statement, which will open up a new window. Now, if you have a rights holder portal attached to this particular rights holder, which we do, then whatever message you're going to write in here is going to directly be embedded into an email. That rights holder is going to be notified by that email and they will have a new statement available in their rights holder portal. So for example, I can say, hi, your statement is ready and hit send. And he will be notified per email and the rights holder portal will have his new statement. And also the status of my statement has automatically changed. Now, going forward from here, the last step would be to create a payment, which again will notify my payment section. So I will click on my payment section. I will have a new payment created. Going forward from this stage, I would simply change the status from unpaid to paid once I have paid my rights holder. At the moment in Reprtoir, you are not able to pay your rights holder directly through our system, but this is something that we will be developing in the future. A bit more on that when I'm going to talk about our roadmap. So in my case, I will mark this as paid and my accounting flow is finished. And that will bring me to our rights holder portal. So I'm going to click on accounts down here, and this will show you the list of all the rights holders that you have rights holder portals attached to. And rights holder portals look like so. So here, for example, your rights holder will have access to their operations, they have access to their statements, and also they have access to the status of your payment, meaning if you've paid them or not. If you change your status in Reprtoir, it will automatically reflect here, so they will know if they've been paid or not. And they also have access to their own analytics. And that brings me to the last part of our demo. I'm going to flip back over into our workspace, and that is our analytics. So I'm going to click on that here. I'm going to exit out of this, take away this filter. So in Reprtoir, you're able to have a full overview of all of your sales data to a very granular degree. And again, you're able to filter all of this information. So for example, let's say I want to see how my guy, Philip Jogwell, is doing. So I will find my artist here, and that's updating live. I can save this search if I want to for the future. In my case, I will leave as is. And you can see I have all the information in relationship to this rights holder right here. And I can also filter, for example, at the moment, this is by country. Let's say I want to see this by retailer, and I can see this also on an annual basis, etc. Okay, so this essentially concludes the overall demonstration of Reprtoir in a comprehensive way. Of course, we understand that there is a lot more detail to all of this depending on the user and what the user needs. Before I let you guys go, I'm going to head back over to my PDF, and I'm going to leave you with some of our last thoughts. So what sets Reprtoir apart? Reprtoir is an all-in-one solution. Our goal is for you to be able to handle all of your music management needs in one place. No more switching between multiple softwares to manage your catalog and process your royalties and more. Also, Reprtoir is half tech and half music industry professionals. This ensures our developing strength, but it also means that we are creating tools that we know are relevant and necessary for the music industry. We have the back knowledge. Our software is 100% online and is based on a flexible subscription model. We pride ourselves on making us accessible to all company sizes, private, indie, major. And lastly, our roadmap. So as I've already shown you, of course, we're soon going to be releasing our AI audio analysis tools, which you have been the first people to see today live. Next, we are also developing Reprtoir Library, which is also imminently going to be released. And that is going to really change the landscape of what Reprtoir can do. Reprtoir Library is going to be a front-facing library that will allow your clients to be able to search your catalog. And this is going to be especially useful for the people working in licensing and sync. And lastly, or almost lastly, supply chain and distribution. So as I was talking about earlier with Release Builder, the goal that we have for Release Builder is that we are going to make it possible for our users to create a release and directly deliver this to their DSPs. And the clients that do not have any deals with DSPs, we will function as a distributor for them. So that is essentially the end goal for Release Builder. And lastly, direct payment. So as I've mentioned, the other thing that we're going to be developing is the possibility to directly pay your rights holders through our system. All right. That essentially concludes our webinar. Don't head off yet because we are going to be doing the Q&A, but please do take a screenshot of this, get in touch with us either per email or over our website. And also we have a 14-day free trial that we would encourage you to give a go. Here are our email addresses. Please get in touch with us if you have any questions or if you'd like to have some help getting started. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.